What is absolutely critical is that we very clearly and concretely set out the specific harms that we're saying are going to occur. And what we need to look for in human rights terms is objectively evidenced, real and concrete harm that will arise from the specific provisions in this bill. So when we're talking about concerns, we have to be that concrete. If we're not that concrete, we can't go on to the next part of the test to find out what's a proportionate response. We take very, very seriously concerns that are raised about possible harmful effects on others, and in this case in particular women and girls. And we looked at that in 2019, 2020, and we were not able to identify any objectively evidenced real and concrete harm that's likely to arise as a result of the reforms proposed.
The argument of the alleged competition of rights was also something that was present in my inquiry through some submissions. And of course, I took it very seriously. And I reached a similar conclusion to that of the Human Rights Commission. The first thing is that it's not supported by evidence that there's any systemic identifiable pattern or risk in the very nature of the situation that is created by legal recognition based on self-identification.
I realise that others have brought up some kind of individual cases. They're ones that, again, we don't take our evidence on the basis of newspaper reports or blogs. We do need to independently verify them, and we haven't found it to be a huge problem.
Can you tell us from experience elsewhere, are there any countries who have monitored the impact of self-identification on the use of single-sex spaces?
I'm not aware of research on that from the countries that I would be conversant with the law in. There has not been widespread abuse of the process or an unexpectedly large number of applications. There has not been widespread reports of abusive use of the process by cisgender men to access women's spaces such as changing rooms or bathrooms.
To say that I don't think there is a significant amount of research out there which has looked at specifically the question of monitoring, and so there's no point. I wouldn't equivocate on that from my perspective. I don't think there is, but I do think there's a couple of things. So we haven't seen abuse in Ireland, and certainly I would say anecdotally I could add to that and say I haven't heard of abuse.
I mean, there was a prisoner, someone who's now a prisoner in Ireland, who was refused a diagnosis of gender dysphoria at a clinic in England, and so was unable to pursue a GRC through that route, but who then, on the basis of self-ID, was able to obtain a GRC in Ireland. And the impact of the management of that prisoner within the female estate has been catastrophic.
I think what I would say is when we're thinking about medicalisation, we have seen some jurisdictions which have specifically put into their law that this process is not going to be medicalised. So the really good example is Malta, which really makes that strong affirmative statement.
I personally find the Maltese system to be a high standard for human rights.
The concerns that perhaps are expressed by people emailing yourself or me have not been found to come to fruition. So sometimes it's the concerns rather than the evidence that those countries have then found once they have these processes in place. And I think the Scottish Human Rights Commission were quite clear that they could find no body of evidence that showed that some of those concerns about, threat to women and girls, or, a major kind of change in society as we know it, that did not happen in those countries, and I've got no reason to believe that Scotland would be any different.
The fact that data doesn't exist or isn't consolidated, I think it exists, as I said, but isn't consolidated and isn't sought for, is not a reflection on that we don't have a problem. It's a reflection on the fact that nobody is looking for it, because we have victims and women organizations telling us, they've been telling us for many years now, and have told us again in this context that it is a problem.